Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, some new polling out of Fox News shows some major problems for the Trump administration and Republicans as we head closer to the midterm elections. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand. It is totally free and real easy to do. Just head on over to your favorite podcast app, search for the Nick Craig Show, tap the subscribe or follow button, and you'll take a new program with you each and every weekday morning. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program brought to you by Melissa Gott and the team over at the Law Group. For any legal questions or challenges you might be facing, first stop, the Law Group. Visit their website, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Today's show and today's topic is probably going to make some of you a little bit uncomfortable. Some of you may not be happy with me when today's program is said and done. But the thing that I have been warning about for the better part of a year now is unfortunately coming to reality for President Donald Trump and largely the Republican Party as we inch ever closer towards November. I have been saying now for a long time that this administration needs to be focused on the domestic kitchen table issues. Those include things like dealing with the economy, dealing with things like inflation and prices, dealing with things like immigration and things of that nature that were and have been major political topics over the last couple of years. And while the administration has focused on some of those areas, probably more than others, in large part, I don't think the vast majority of the American people believe that this administration is laser focused on these issues, which in large part are domestic problems. This administration has been so hyper-focused on all of these international issues, and that's not to say that these international issues are not important. That is not to say that this stuff should not be talked about. That is not to say that this stuff shouldn't be dealt with, because it's all important, right? Domestic issues are important, so are international issues. But the reality that seems to be popping up in a variety of different polls over the last probably 30 days or so, as I've been kind of looking at some of these national opinion polls, is that people just don't think that this administration is focusing on the issues that matter to them. And that is becoming a major problem. And here's the reality check. We are less than 90 days away here in North Carolina from voters making their way to voting locations. Polls open as part of the early voting period October the 15th here in North Carolina. That is less than 90 days from today. We are rapidly approaching a period of time in which individuals are going to be asked, who do you want to lead the country moving forward? Now, obviously, the president is not on the ballot. He's not going anywhere. But the question is still asked. You're going to be voting for members of the United States Senate, members of Congress. How and who do you want leading those discussions? And unfortunately, the vast majority of the polling, I'm not going to say all, but the vast majority of the polling does not show that Republicans are in a good spot. It just doesn't. I'm not here to be the doomsday guy. I'm not here to be overly negative about the situation, but I follow this stuff closely. I keep tabs on this stuff. I keep track of what some of these trends are, and unfortunately, they're not looking very good right now for the Republicans. And I've used this analogy for a long time about this runway, right? When a plane is taking off or landing, you've got a runway that you've got to, of course, keep the plane on that runway. For takeoff, you can't run out of room. You got to get over the tree line. Same thing on landing. You got to land at a certain point or you'll run off the end of the runway. And we have a political runway here in America. And I've been talking about this now for the better part of 12 months, that every single day that goes by, each and every day when got a new edition of the Nick Craig Show and we talk about issues, that runway gets just a little bit shorter every single day. And we are, again, less than 90 days now, at least in North Carolina. Other states have different early voting periods, from voters making their way out to voting locations. It is going to be here before you know it. We are here in the latter parts of July already. We'll be flipping the calendar over to August, starting next weekend. It is coming rapidly. And I struggle with, is there enough time for things to change? Because they do have to change. This is sparked by a brand new Fox News poll that was released this week that shows very bluntly and very frankly that voters are unhappy with a lot of what's going on in the country and want a major change. And of course, in a midterm election, that major change, at least with what we have right now in terms of its political structure, that major change would be a huge win for Democrats. Let me make sure I say and give the disclaimer that I do every single time I talk about a poll, because for those that don't read through political polls or follow that process, a political poll is not a prediction. It's not. A political poll is a snapshot. You take a relatively small time frame, a defined time, typically a couple of days that a poll is conducted. You take a certain number of individuals, and it is a picture. It is a snapshot of what is going on right here, right now. And it's good, because with a political poll, what you're traditionally looking for are trends. You're looking to see, are things trending in the right direction? One individual poll can be flawed. And that's why you see a margin of error in polls of typically a couple of percentage points, anywhere between 2 and 4%. There is some wiggle room. There is some leeway. But also, you can't look at a poll that was conducted 2 weeks ago and say, well, that's what everybody's thinking right now, because things change. But the trend, the overall trend, is not good for the GOP, not good for the Trump administration. And looking at some of the details in this Fox News poll, it is as bad as could be for the Trump administration and Republicans. Voters were asked a variety of different topics. The question, which political party, the Democrat or the Republicans, do you think would do a better job on each of the following? A couple of the things are more left-wing, but income inequality, 60% think the Democrats would handle that better compared to 38% for Republicans. Healthcare, 60%, again, for Democrats, 39% for Republicans. Inflation and prices, 54% say that the Democrats would handle that better compared to 44% for Republicans. The economy, very similar numbers, 54% for the Democrats, 45% for the GOP. Even foreign policy, something that Republicans typically poll very well on, 53% say that the Democrats are better at handling foreign policy than the Republicans at just 46%. Government spending, 51 Democrats, 48 Republicans. Immigration, listen to this, 50% Democrats, 49 Republicans. It's not until you get to national security and crime that voters think that the Republicans will handle that issue better. 50% of voters say that the Republicans are better at handling national security compared to 48% for the Democrats, and crime, 53% Republicans, 46% for Democrats. These, ladies and gentlemen, are not good figures. These are not good numbers. This Fox News poll was conducted July the 17th through the 20th. It does have a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. But you look at a couple of these issues like inflation and prices and the economy, even a 3% margin of error on those topics still gives the Democrats a pretty sizable advantage. Still gives the Democrats a pretty sizable lead as to who is the best political party, who are the best politicians to handle these issues. And the reality is one that I think is hard for a lot of those on the political right to swallow. It's not that the Democrats have better ideas. You and I know that that's not the case. The issue is not that voters think, I don't believe, that Democrats truly are better at handling all of these issues. But what they do understand and what they do feel is that right now, the GOP, which has control, you've got a Republican president in the Oval Office, you've got a majority in the United States Senate, you've got a majority in the United States House, are not doing a good enough job handling a variety of these issues. Healthcare costs are out of control. individuals that do not have coverage through their health, through their employer, are spending hundreds of dollars a month on insurance. Ask me how I know, because I'm one of them. That's a major problem for a lot of people. Gas prices through the roof. The economy not trending in the right direction. These are some major warning signs for the GOP. Major warning signs. And my fear is here on, July the 23rd, that there is an ever shrinking amount of time to begin to turn this stuff around. And that is the big concern that I'm seeing right now. And unfortunately, it appears that the administration is just not focused on this stuff. Or if they are focused on it, they're not focused on it in a sufficient way that's communicating it, and it's not being communicated well to the American people. We are talking about a brand new poll out over at Fox News. It was conducted July the 17th through the 20th, so over the last week or so, and it shows some very troubling numbers for the Republican Party. Democrats, when asked in the poll which political party, the Democrats or the Republicans, do you think would do a better job on each of the following issues? Democrats lead Republicans on income inequality, healthcare, inflation and prices, the economy, foreign policy, government spending, and even immigration. In this new poll conducted by Fox News, it's only national security and crime where individuals think that the Republicans would do a better job handling it. And this is going to be a major problem for the Republican Party as we head into the midterm, and specifically the economy. And specifically the issues that we are seeing right now. And the reason that I say that this is using the analogy of an airplane or an airport and a runway is because things like the economy, the broader overall economic conditions, which, yes, are improved slightly, no question about it. Inflation was much higher under the Biden administration compared to where it was now. The average, I think, was 3.5%. It's in the mid twos or high twos right now. It's down. I'm not going to sit here. I can look at the numbers. I do look at the numbers. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, oh, it's prices are the same. They're not. They're down a little bit, but they're not down enough. And unfortunately, when you look at the overall consumer price index and you look at the overall inflation numbers, while yes, they're down, there are so many sectors, specifically like energy, that are so much more expensive that it's wiping and washing a lot of that out. The purpose of this is not, the purpose of the conversation today is not to get into some major doomsday scenario or tell you that at this point in time you might as well just throw in the towel, it's all over. No, I don't think that's the case. I'm not in the business of making election predictions. Individuals that say, oh, here's my prediction. That's not the game I play. Now, I may do that privately with individuals. I don't typically make election predictions because, especially this far out, they're not accurate. They're not based on anything, and anybody can just say what they want. I'm not making a prediction as to what the results of the midterm election will be. What I will say, and what I believe I can say with some high level of certainty, is if some of this stuff doesn't begin a rapid change very quickly, again, less than 90 days until voters make their way to ballot voting locations and ballot boxes here in North Carolina, the odds of Republicans holding off the Democrats in a midterm election is going to be very tough. Now, let me also state, and I've talked about this in great detail as well, midterms always, not almost always, not sometimes, midterms always favor the party that is not in charge. The midterms are always a quote-unquote referendum on current leadership. Always a referendum on who's in charge. This has been the case now in modern politics for decades. So it is nothing new that the party not in power, that would currently be the Democrats, would have a banner year in a midterm election. It has been the case with Democrats in office. We just saw it back in 2022, and we are likely heading towards seeing that coming up here in November. Part of that is just the nature of what midterm elections are, but others are, I think, rooted in a lot of general frustration, rooted in a lot of concerns as to what is going on. We've got some comments coming in on our chat here. The rhinos in the Senate are not doing anything. People feel damned if they will do anything, but they don't. Voting red, nothing done. That's a big concern as well. And while I don't know that this poll necessarily reflects some of that, it's a great comment. It's the truth. We have a Republican majority. We've had a Republican majority since early in 2025. It's been well over a year. It's been well over a year and a half that Donald Trump has been in the Oval Office as the duly sworn president of the United States, and Republicans were sworn into Congress, and we've had the majority. And I think that is a major issue as well, is that we do have the majorities. We do have the ability to fix and work on some of this stuff, but because there is so much infighting, because there is so much nonsense going on, because unfortunately Senate Leader John Thune is completely inept at his job, nothing is getting done. It's very similar to what we saw in 2017 and 2018. Now, the conversation is a little bit different. You don't have individuals in GOP leadership in Congress actively going after the president of the United States, but the end result is the same. And that end result is nothing. Nothing is being done. And so you look at what happened in the 2018 midterm elections. I'll remind you, it was not a good year for Republicans. The Republicans got creamed at the ballot box. It was not a good year. You had GOP leadership in Congress going after the president. The Trump administration, who seemingly didn't think they would be able to win, had not surrounded himself with the best people. It was a disaster in 2018. And again, part of that is typical. Part of that is what a midterm election is. And part of it you just can't deal with. Here's another concerning thing from the Fox News poll out this week. When asked, how motivated are you to vote in the November election, 59% were all voters combined. 68% of Democrats said that they were extremely motivated, compared to just 57% of Republicans and 41% of independents. If you do the math on that, Democrats have an 11-point advantage over the Republicans in saying that they are extremely motivated to vote. This is part of the reason why midterm elections typically favor the party not in charge. Because for the last 2 years, the Republican Party has been steering the ship, leading the charge, at least on a couple of issues out of Washington, D.C., and that has been very much a frustrating thing for Democrats to deal with. So they're highly motivated. Republicans, 57 is not a terrible number, but an 11-point margin, an 11-point swing between Democrats and Republicans, that's a pretty big gap. That's a pretty big delta between those two numbers. Now, those 41% of independents, it's not immediately clear, of course, where those independents fall. In North Carolina, an independent looks very different than an independent in other states. It's kind of a loaded term depending on where you live in the United States and what the political climate is in your various areas. And even within a state, you can see those numbers be different as well. An independent in Charlotte versus an independent in rural Western North Carolina can be two very different people from a political standpoint and a political background. Long story short, Democrats are far more motivated and far more interested in getting out and voting in November than those Republicans. And I think part of it, going back to the chat we read earlier, is that there's too much of nothing happening in Washington, D.C. John Thune, the United States Senate, and then as well as the United States House, they have not been effective. And so Republican voters and maybe independents that would vote for Republicans lean back and say, oh, well, what's the point of electing these individuals? There's no point in this at all because nothing is going to be done. The SAVE Act has been sitting on John Thune's desk for 8 months? And there's been zero movement on it. This is becoming a major problem for the Republican Party to deal with. I've been sounding the alarm for a year, and unfortunately, the runway is closing. The runway is running out of room. We'll get into some more details on this poll, plus some of your comments as well, coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to tell you about the Law Group here in Wilmington and remind you that when legal challenges arise, put your trust in the Law Group in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, folks. They're not some big national law firm. Melissa Gott and her team live right here in southeastern North Carolina. Their office is located in downtown Wilmington, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, we'll get into more of this poll, plus some of your comments as well as the Nick Craig Show continues, streaming live this Thursday morning, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Thursday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Thanks for spending some time here today. Don't forget, if you miss any portion of the program, check out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app or visit the website nickcraig.com. We're talking about some new polling out of Fox News. They're the most recent one I've been watching. I typically don't look at national polls because they're kind of hard to gauge, and the sample size nationally is relatively small. So it's hard to look at some of that stuff and say, oh, this is 100% what's going to happen. But as you get closer to the election cycle, and at this point in time, for those that say, there's still plenty of time, we're 103 days away from the midterm elections. Early voting in North Carolina starts in less than 90 days. And so, yes, there's still time. It is not tomorrow for sure, but things have got to start changing pretty dramatically. And so starting to look at these national polls, which I'll continue to do now through Election Day, the numbers, at least as of right now, do not look very good for the Republicans. Democrats lead Republicans in handling of issues on income inequality, healthcare, inflation and prices, the economy, foreign policy, government spending, and immigration. Those are the issues right now in this most recent Fox News poll, one of many, it's not an outlier, that show voters believe that Democrats are better at handling some of these issues. Comment coming in, polls don't tell the entire story. Now, that is true. They don't. They're not predictions. They are snapshots of a period in time. When you look at political, at least when I look at political polls, and for those that are maybe going to be diving more into this, there's a great website that I would suggest if you're interested at looking at more political polling and looking to get into some of this stuff in the months to come. RealClearPolling.com. RealClearPolling.com. I'll throw the link over in the show notes at patreon.com/Nick Craig. Is a product of Real Clear Politics, and it shows genuine over an overall dissection of a lot of these polls and shows these trends moving forward. For example, one of the key polls right now shows the 2026 generic congressional vote, which has Democrats at 48.9%, Republicans at 44%. And so that poll is actually not that bad. Typically, that number is a little bit higher in midterm elections. Again, it's why you look at the trend lines in some of these polls. Unfortunately, some of the other stuff in this poll shows that Trump's disapproval is 15 points underwater, and wrong track of the country, direction of the country is wrong track by almost 24%. And so these are very large numbers that there is a relatively short amount of time to deal with. Back to the comment. Polls don't tell the whole story. There's plenty of time for things to change. There's time for some things to change. Unfortunately, one of the largest issue in every political election is the economy. And you've heard me use the analogy of a very large ship. For those that have seen big cargo ships and big, large vessels, cruise ships, those things don't move on a dime. They're slow, right? To do the process of spinning a boat around, it doesn't happen in 30 seconds versus like it does on a much smaller vessel. It takes some time. It can take a little bit of time to do. That's the problem with the economy. And that is probably the largest issue, or one of the largest issues that this administration is facing right now, the economy. And unfortunately, that doesn't change on a dime. Let's say that tomorrow the president announced some new initiative that was going to begin the process of making serious changes to the U.S. economy and bringing things in line. Because the economy is such a vast organism, it is such a large beast, it takes months for some of these things to be felt. It does not happen overnight. And so, like, for example, when interest rates drop, it takes a little bit of time for that to propagate through the economy before you start seeing credit card rates fall, before you start seeing mortgage rates fall. It takes a little bit of time. Now, it doesn't take a year, but it can take weeks and in some cases months for those changes to be felt. And that's why I'm starting to see these trends and start to worry about the time that is available. We are 103 days away from Election Day. And so anything that takes longer than a month or two to propagate or take effect or begin for changes to be seen, by the time those changes are felt, we're at the start of early voting. We're at the start of the period where individuals are making their way to the ballot box. And so that is why there needs to be, and there should have been, and I don't think there was enough over the last 6 months to a year, this laser focus on domestic issues. Now, that's not to say that something like the war in Iran is not important. I am a firm believer that the Iranian leadership, the Iranian regime, should not have the ability to develop a nuclear weapon. I am not against the Trump administration in their quest to make sure that doesn't happen. This is not me being critical of the Iranian war. But the reality is, what is the vast majority of the American people feeling as a result of this war? It's higher gas prices. And we are now seeing, once again, for the first time in about 5 weeks, crude oil prices back over $90 a barrel. And so once again, you are going to see, and already have seen over the last day, the national average for gasoline jump back over $4 per gallon. And that is going to continue. Gas, or sweet crude and oil prices are likely going to continue to climb into the low to mid 90s. And that is going to happen because there's no indication that there's going to be a solution on the Iranian war right now. It just doesn't. I mean, I listened to Marco Rubio yesterday saying, oh, yeah, we're willing and ready to negotiate. We've been willing and ready to negotiate now for 6 months. And there hasn't been any substantial progress. There hasn't been any major gains. Yes, we did see gas prices fall over the last 5 weeks or so. Looking at a chart over at GasBuddy, we saw gas, which at its peak over the last 3 months was $4.57 per gallon. We saw that drop. The lowest price was, looks like it would be July the 6th is when it bottomed out at $3.71 per gallon. And we have now seen the rise since the July the 4th weekend. Over the last 15 to 20 days, we've seen that gradual march up. And now, once again, we are looking at gas prices over $4 a gallon. And so you got to remember that the vast majority of the American people do not follow politics closely. I will reiterate this until somebody cuts me off and takes away my ability to have a voice and do a show and talk. The vast majority of the American people are not that heavily invested in politics. I think that's a bad thing, but that's the reality of the situation. Don't shoot the messenger. That's the fact that we have to deal with. What do they see? They see $4 a gallon gas at a gas station. That does not help them. That does not put them in a good situation. Another comment coming in. Trump promised so much with bringing down gas prices and heating bills, etc., and it didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, that's the unfortunate reality. I'm not anti-Trump. I'm not here. This is not meant to be time to pack up the ship and move on from Trump. I'm not one of these loser Republicans that says, oh, well, it's time for Trump to go. That his plan is already. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm still in full support of this administration. I've voted for the president in every primary and every general election that he's been on a ballot, going all the way back to 2016. So this is not a commentary on, well, I'm done with Trump now. I'm not one of these loser Republicans. I'm not. But these are real things. This is not some tinfoil hat conspiracy. This is real stuff that is affecting real people. And unfortunately, because of so much emphasis on foreign issues, most predominantly the war in Iran, these domestic things in which, yes, there have been some good policies, it's just getting lost. It's getting washed out by gas prices at $4.57 a gallon not more than 2 months ago. None of that other stuff matters when people are spending $80 or $90 to fill up their gas tank. When they're seeing their fuel prices double. None of that other stuff matters because people aren't generally that politically in tune. They're just not. Again, I don't like that that's the case. I don't think that puts the United States on a great foot moving forward when you've got the vast majority of the populace that doesn't know what is going on. But those are the cards that we've been dealt. That is unfortunately in large part due to our public education system that hasn't bothered to make sure that we have an informed populace that gets engaged and gets involved in this stuff. And so it's these things like prices at the grocery store, gas prices that drive a lot of individuals. And if you ask people right now who's better to handle this stuff moving forward, they're going to say the Democrats. That's the unfortunate reality of what has been created. I don't like it. I'm not happy that that's the case. But that is the fact. Gas prices back 2 months ago were national average $4.57 per gallon. That is an abysmal failure of this administration. That is being way too laser focused on international issues and unfortunately forgetting the domestic stuff. And that, I will contend to you, is a major problem. I am a Trump supporter. I am a Trump fan. I am not a fan of gas at $4.60 a gallon. I'm not. And I'm not going to sit here and cover for it. I'm not going to sit here and put on rose-colored glasses and say everything's fine because it's not. I mean, it's just not. In rounding out the conversation on some of this new political polling out from Fox News, which does not show a very good situation for Republicans as we head into the midterm elections, Democrats leading on a lot of the major issues here. This is something that this administration has to deal with. There has to be a laser focus on domestic issues. And I unfortunately feel like too much time is being spent on these international issues that, frankly, and I'm just going to be blunt about it, the vast majority of people do not care about. They just don't. I and you don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I don't think the vast majority of the American people care. Or they may say they care, but they're not willing to pay $6 for a gallon of gas because of it, right? That's where the disconnect is. They may care, but they're going to say, well, yeah, it's important, but is it worth me not being able to afford to put gas in my car? I think most people would say, no, this is not a good situation. Reading from the Fox News article, the Democratic advantage comes amid weak ratings for Trump and continued economic pessimism. Trump's job approval stands at 39%, unchanged for the third month in a row, at 1 point above his low of 38% in October of 2017, right ahead of a year ahead of those midterm elections. Approval of Trump is a touch lower than former President Barack Obama at this point. He was at 42% in July of 2014. Trump received net negative ratings for handling immigration, Iran, the economy, and inflation, as three quarters rate the economy negatively about the same for the past 6 months. And that is the issue that this administration has not dealt with. It just hasn't. It has not dealt with the economy. It hasn't. Yes, there's been legislation. Yes, there's been executive orders. Yes, there has been some changes. Sure. Inflation is a tad bit lower than it was in the past. But overall, this broader economic prosperity, I don't think the vast majority of people are feeling it. I know I'm not. I know most people are not. And so when you were elected, and that the reality is, the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, I should more accurately say, rose to major successes in 2024. A large part of that was the economy. A large part of that was handling of economic issues, which the Biden administration completely fell on its face on. And so there's a bunch of different places that you can point at and blame. I think some of it is at the president's feet. I think other is at members of not even individual members, but overall the overall Congress, where you've got largely inaction from GOP leadership, more specifically in the United States Senate. And so you've got a lot of moving pieces. You've got a lot of parts of this puzzle. And unfortunately, you're putting it together and things aren't adding up. You can't find the pieces. It's not connecting. You're not seeing the full picture. And that's the problem right now. And so it's one thing to complain. It's one thing to say, oh, this is a problem. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a big solutions-oriented guy. And so the solution for this administration moving forward, again, less than 90 days before voters head to poll voting locations here in North Carolina, 103 days until the midterm election, the solution is one that is, I think, relatively simple. Iran and that conflict needs to get wrapped up like right now. This cannot drag on for another 30, 60, 90 days. I can say with almost complete certainty, if 90 days from now, when people are heading to the polls, if the war in Iran is still essentially in the same situation that it is right now, Republicans are going to get blown out at the ballot box. They are going to get annihilated at the ballot box. That is going to be a real thing. And so that's got to be number one. That has to be dealt with. And unfortunately, it's now turned into a domestic issue because of the situation, because of what has gone on or not gone on over the last 6 months. The problems overseas have now translated to here on U.S. soil, most prominently with gas prices, where we are now seeing, once again, oil well over $90 a gallon. And it will likely stay in that way for, I guess, the foreseeable future, because there's no negotiations going on that I can determine. There's no idea that this thing is being wrapped up. And so it's going to continue. Again, voters are not that connected. They're just not. I wish I could tell you otherwise. I wish I could tell you that we had an incredibly informed populace that would be willing to deal with this stuff. But the other issue here is one that I've talked about in great detail. We are coming out of 4 years of rough economic times. It really started in 2020 with COVID and the entire economy being flipped upside down. So going back to early 2020, we have been dealing now with what? 6.5 years of rough, relatively rocky roads as it relates to the economy. People need relief. I think, and I'm just spitballing on this, but I think people are willing to deal with some level of economic uncertainty or economic pain for a relatively short amount of time for larger concessions. For example, again, like Iran. But people are at a breaking point because these economic pressures, these economic pains have not just been going on for the last 6 months, last year, or 2 years. For many people, this has been 4, 5, 6 years of a relatively rough economy. And so while maybe early on people said, we can deal with this temporarily, it's no longer temporary. It's become the status quo. It's been 4, 5, 6 years since some of these pressures existed, and that's kind of the spot that we're at. That's kind of where this administration is right now. And it's seemingly not changing and not going anywhere. And so I think the leeway, the amount of time that people are willing to deal with some of those economic pressures, some of those economic concerns, some of those economic uncertainties, that time is past. We just dealt with 4 years of a Biden administration that completely butchered the U.S. economy. And so while, yes, some things are trending in the right direction, some sectors are doing better, some level of economic pressure has been resolved, all of that is true. And I'm not going to sit here and take any of that away from this administration. But a lot of that is negated and totally nullified by gas prices. And I know I keep talking about gas prices. I know I've gotten some emails and some posts in the past. You're harping too much on gas prices. The reason I'm harping on gas prices is because that's what everybody deals with. Drive around any town, any city here in North Carolina, and you will see people, regular, everyday, normal people at every gas station that you pass. That's why it's a big deal. Same thing at the grocery store. Why was egg prices such a big deal for the Biden administration? Because everybody purchases that stuff. Regular, everyday people go into a grocery store once or twice a week. They are buying food for themselves and for their families. And so when there's pressures there, when there's price concerns there, when there's hikes there, it affects people. That's why I harp on these issues. That's why I continue to talk about oil prices and gas prices, because it affects everybody. Regular, everyday, non-political people. And so my premise in all of this is to say that this administration has got to step on the gas here, no pun intended. They have got to get laser focused on these domestic issues. This war in Iran has got to be wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. If not, it is a very bleak future for the Republicans as we approach the midterms. I do not see a way that the GOP holds off Democrats flipping the United States House and potentially the United States Senate if some of this stuff is not resolved. The American people are not going to stand for it. They've been dealing with economic pressures now 4, 5, 6 years. They are looking for some relief. They hoped they'd get it with the Trump administration, and unfortunately, as of right now, they have not. And that is going to be a major problem. Don't shoot the messenger here. I'm not throwing in the towel on the election. I'm not throwing in the towel on Donald Trump. I still think he's done a fine job on a variety of issues, but I'm not going to bury my head in the sand like I've unfortunately seen a lot of people doing over the last couple of weeks, burying their head in the sand, pretending that everything's fine. It's not. And it's got to be dealt with. It's got to. So we'll be keeping an eye on some of these national polls as we approach Election Day coming up here in November. Early voting starting October the 15th here across North Carolina. We'll keep you up to date with the details right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, that's going to do it for a Thursday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, 7 a.m. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Thursday, wet couple of days across the state the next few days. We're back tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.